Static filled David's helmet radio as he flew his small ship through the void between dead stars. 3 weeks into his solo mission, he had grown used to the silence. Earth Command sent him out here to map new jump routes, but space this far from home felt empty and cold. His instruments showed nothing but rocks and gas clouds for light years in every direction. Then the signal came. It started as a whisper beneath the cosmic background noise. David almost missed it completely. The computer flagged it as artificial, definitely not natural radiation from the nearby dying star. Someone or something was calling for help from the small moon orbiting the gas giant ahead. David knew the rules. Solo scouts were supposed to report back before investigating anything unusual. But the signal was weak and getting weaker. By the time he called Earth and waited for orders, whoever was sending it might be dead. He changed course toward the moon. The gas giant loomed ahead like a sick eye, its surface streaked with poison clouds. The moon that orbited it looked even worse. Radiation readings spiked as David got closer. His ship's computer warned him about toxic atmosphere and surface conditions that could kill an unprotected human in minutes. The locals called this place Mortis 7, but most people just knew it as the Death Moon. David's scanners picked up the signal source near what looked like ruins on the night side of the moon. Ancient structures jutted from the rocky surface like broken teeth. As he flew lower, he could see they were carved with strange patterns that reminded him of scales and wings. Dragon motifs, maybe, though David had never seen a real dragon outside of old Earth stories. Landing was dangerous. The atmosphere tried to eat through his ship's hull, and radiation storms danced across the horizon like angry spirits. David sat down as close to the ruins as he dared and checked his environmental suit 3 times before stepping outside. The signal led him deeper into the ancient city. Massive stone blocks towered overhead, covered in writing he couldn't read. Everything felt old and abandoned, like a tomb that had been sealed for thousands of years. His radiation detector clicked steadily, but the reading stayed just below lethal levels. At the center of the ruins stood a pyramid-shaped building with its top cut off flat. Steps led up to an altar where the signal was strongest. David climbed carefully, his boots echoing in the dead air. What he found at the top made him forget about radiation and protocol and everything else. A woman was chained to the altar. She looked mostly human, but her skin had a strange shimmer to it, like scales catching light. Her hair was long and dark, and even unconscious she seemed to glow faintly. Metal bands around her wrists and ankles pulsed with energy that made David's scanner go crazy. The chains weren't just holding her down, they were draining her somehow. David knelt beside her and checked for signs of life. Her pulse was weak but steady. She was breathing, barely. When he touched her shoulder, her eyes snapped open. They were the color of molten gold. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. David leaned closer and heard broken words in what might have been Galactic Standard, the trade language used by most spacefaring species. Something about the sky voices and the cursed one and death spirits coming with the storms. Easy, David said, though he wasn't sure she could understand him. I'm here to help. Her golden eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed. She said something else, clearer this time. David's translator finally kicked in and gave him the meaning. You came from the star voices, the forbidden knowledge bringers. I'm human, David said slowly. From Earth, I heard your signal. She stared at him for a long moment, then tried to sit up. The energy chain sparked and she collapsed with a cry of pain. David could see now that the metal bands were burning her skin wherever they touched, some kind of torture device designed to keep her weak and helpless. How long have you been here? David asked. 7 cycles of the death wind, she whispered. My people left me for the spirits to take. But the spirits never came. Only you, 7 cycles. David's computer had detected evidence of regular radiation storms on this moon. If each cycle was a storm, she had been chained here for months at least. How was she still alive? What's your name? He asked. Sarah, she said. Last daughter of the Flamewing clan. Cast out for listening to the star voices. For seeking forbidden truth. David felt anger building in his chest. Her own people had left her here to die for the crime of curiosity. For wanting to learn. That was something he could understand. Earth's history was full of people punished for asking the wrong questions. Well, Sarah of the Flamewing clan, David said. You're not going to die today. I'm getting you out of here. He examined the energy shackles more closely. They were definitely alien technology, more advanced than anything humans had developed. The metal seemed to feed on Sarah's life force somehow, keeping her too weak to break free. But they also looked old and damaged. Maybe he could find a way to shut them down. Why? Sarah asked. I am cursed, forsaken by my own kind. Why would a star voice help the abandoned one? David met her golden gaze. Because abandoning someone for wanting to learn is wrong. Because leaving you here to die is wrong. Because if your people can't see your worth, then they're idiots. For the first time since he found her, Sarah smiled. It was a small smile, weak and tired, but it lit up her whole face. You speak strangely for a star voice, she said, but your words have warmth in them. Just call me David, he said, already working on the nearest shackle with his toolkit. And we're getting off this death rock together. As if in response to his words, thunder rolled across the horizon. A new radiation storm was building, one that would make the current levels look safe. David worked faster, knowing that time was running out for both of them. But for the first time in weeks, he wasn't alone in the void. And somehow that made all the difference. The radiation storm hit just as David managed to carry Sarah back to his ship. Wind howled across the dead landscape, carrying clouds of poison that would have killed them both in seconds. Inside the ship's medical bay, emergency lights cast everything in red as the hull shielded them from the worst of the storm. Sarah lay unconscious on the medical table while David worked on the energy shackles. His tools were designed for human technology, but the alien metal responded to electromagnetic pulses in predictable ways. It just took patience and careful experimentation to find the right frequency. The first shackle came free after 6 hours of work. Sarah's wrist was burned underneath, the skin blackened and raw. David cleaned the wound as gently as he could and applied healing gel from his medical supplies. Even unconscious, she flinched when he touched the damaged area. While the medical scanner ran diagnostics on Sarah's condition, David studied recordings from his helmet camera. The ruins outside were definitely dragon-themed, but they showed signs of advanced engineering hidden beneath primitive stonework. Whoever built this place had understood energy manipulation on a level that impressed even human scientists. When Sarah finally woke up, the storm was still raging outside. She sat up slowly, testing her freed hand with wonder. The skin was healing faster than David had expected, the burns already fading to pink marks. The binding is broken, she said in amazement. I can feel the fire in my blood again. Fire in your blood? David asked. Sarah held up her hand and concentrated. Her skin began to glow with a soft light that had nothing to do with the ship's emergency systems. The temperature in the medical bay rose several degrees. My people are children of flame and sky, she explained. We carry the starfire within us. But the shackles, they drained it away, made me weak like the cold-blood creatures. David's scanner went wild as Sarah demonstrated her abilities. Energy readings spiked beyond anything in his database. Whatever she was doing defied human understanding of biology and physics. The storm will pass in 2 days, David said, trying to focus on practical matters. Can you tell me more about your people? About what happened here? Sarah's glow faded as her expression grew sad. We are all that remains of the great sky clans. Long ago, our ancestors ruled the spaces between stars. But the sundering came. The great disaster that scattered us across the void. Some clans found new homes. Others, like mine, were driven to dead places like this moon. She gestured toward the storm raging outside. The death winds come with the season. My people believe they are spirits sent to punish us for ancient sins. They perform rituals to appease the spirits, offer sacrifices when the winds grow strong. And you were the sacrifice, David said grimly. I was the heretic, Sarah corrected. For 7 seasons I listened to the star voices, your people's transmissions from the void. I learned your words, your numbers, your ways of thinking. I told the clan elders that the death winds were not spirits but natural forces that could be understood and predicted. David felt that familiar anger rising again. They tried to kill you for being right. They tried to kill me for bringing change, Sarah said. The old ways are dying with our world, but the elders preferred death to adaptation. They said I was corrupted by forbidden knowledge, that only my sacrifice could restore the ancient balance. Over the next 2 days, as they waited for the storm to pass, David learned more about Sarah's people and their tragic history. The dragon clans had once been part of a vast galactic civilization, masters of energy manipulation and space travel. But some catastrophe had destroyed their empire and left the survivors scattered and primitive. Sarah's clan had spent generations on the Death Moon, slowly dying as radiation poisoned their world. They blamed supernatural forces for their suffering instead of understanding the science behind it. When Sarah tried to bring them knowledge from human radio transmissions, they saw it as dangerous heresy. "Your people's voices gave me hope," Sarah told David as they shared a meal from his emergency rations. They spoke of exploration, of seeking knowledge among the stars. They sounded like the old stories of my ancestors before fear made them small. David found himself fascinated by Sarah's intelligence and curiosity. Despite months of torture and isolation, she had retained her hope and her desire to learn. She absorbed information about human technology and culture with an eagerness that reminded him why he had become an explorer in the first place. Working together, they began repairs on David's ship. The landing had damaged several systems and the radiation storm had caused more problems. But Sarah's energy manipulation abilities proved invaluable. She could channel power directly into the ship's systems, bypassing damaged components that would have taken weeks to replace. "Your metal servants are clever," Sarah said as she worked with the ship's computer. "But they think in straight lines. Sometimes power needs to flow like water, finding new paths when the old ones are blocked." Under her guidance, David rerouted the ship's entire power grid. What should have been impossible repairs became elegant solutions. Human engineering combined with dragon instincts created something neither species could have achieved alone. As they worked, David noticed other changes in Sarah. Her skin grew brighter and more colorful as her strength returned. Sometimes he caught glimpses of something that might have been scales along her arms and neck. Her eyes seemed to glow from within and her hair moved even when there was no air current. "Are you changing back into your real form?" David asked one evening as they tested the repaired navigation system. "I am becoming myself again," Sarah said. "The shackles forced me into this shape, made me small and weak like the earthbound creatures. But my true nature is fire and sky and the spaces between worlds. Will you still be you?" David asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to him. Sarah looked at him with those golden eyes, and her smile was warm enough to heat the entire ship. "I will always be me, David of Earth. The one who listened to star voices and chose knowledge over fear. The one who came for me when no one else would." That night, as they made final preparations for departure, David realized something that scared and excited him in equal measure. In just a few days, this strange, brilliant woman had become the most important person in his life. The thought of delivering her to Earth Command for study and debriefing filled him with protective rage. Sarah seemed to sense his thoughts. "What troubles you, Star Voice?" "I'm thinking about what happens when we leave here," David admitted. "About what my people will want to do when they meet you. And what do you want to do?" Sarah asked quietly. David looked at her, really looked at her, and saw intelligence, courage, and kindness wrapped in an alien form that grew more beautiful every day. He saw someone who had chosen truth over tradition, growth over safety, hope over despair. "I want to protect you," he said honestly. "I want to learn from you. I want to explore the universe with someone who understands that knowledge is more valuable than comfort." Sarah moved closer to him, her hand finding his. Where their skin touched, he felt warmth that had nothing to do with her fire blood abilities. "Then perhaps," she said softly, "we should explore it together." Warning alarms screamed through the ship as David checked the sensors for the third time in an hour. The readings hadn't changed, but he kept hoping his instruments were wrong. Outside the viewport, the sky was turning the color of old blood as charged particles gathered in massive storm formations. "The great death wind comes," Sarah said quietly from behind him. She had been watching the storm build for hours, her expression growing more troubled as the radiation levels climbed. "This one is larger than any in living memory." David's computer confirmed what they both already knew. The approaching storm was beyond anything his ship could withstand. The radiation levels would cook them alive even inside the hull, and the electromagnetic pulse would fry every system they had just finished repairing. "How did your people survive storms like this?" David asked. "Mostly we didn't," Sarah said. "The great death winds come perhaps once in a generation. When they do, the clan retreats to the deep caves and prays to survive. Many don't." "We can't reach the caves in time," David said, checking the distance readings. "And even if we could, I don't think they'd be deep enough to protect us from this level of radiation." Sarah moved to stand beside him at the control panel. Her skin was glowing brighter now, responding to stress and the electromagnetic buildup in the atmosphere. When she touched the ship's hull, sparks jumped between her fingers and the metal. "There is another way," she said slowly. "The old stories speak of a ritual, a binding between souls that can shield them from the death winds. But it requires two people from different stars, different worlds. Their combined essence creates a barrier stronger than stone or metal." "Different stars," David repeated. "Like a human and a dragon. Like us," Sarah confirmed. "But the ritual is more than protection, David. It creates a bond that cannot be broken, a joining of spirits that lasts beyond death. Your people would call it marriage." David stared at her, his mind racing. Marriage. To an alien woman he had known for less than a week, it should have seemed insane, impulsive, impossible. But as he looked at Sarah, brilliant, brave, beautiful Sarah who had chosen knowledge over fear and hope over despair, it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. "Are you asking me to marry you?" he said. "I am telling you there is a way to survive what comes," Sarah replied. "The choice is yours to make." The storm was moving faster now, racing across the dead landscape like an avalanche of poisoned light. David's radiation detectors were already showing dangerous levels, and they had maybe an hour before the worst of it hit. "If we do this ritual," David said, "what exactly happens?" "The stories say that two souls from different stars can share their strength, each making the other more than they were alone. Your human determination and my dragon fire joined together should be enough to protect us both." "Should be?" Sarah met his eyes honestly. "The ritual has not been performed in many generations. I know the words and the forms, but I cannot promise it will work." David thought about his options. Stay in the ship and die from radiation poisoning. Try to reach the caves and probably die anyway. Or trust in an ancient dragon ritual performed by a woman he had fallen in love with without quite realizing it. When he put it like that, the choice was easy. "Sarah of the Flamewing clan," David said formally. "Will you marry me?" Her smile could have powered the ship for a week. "David of Earth, Star Voice, and Breaker of Chains, I will bond my soul to yours for all time." The ritual had to be performed in the open air, under the storm itself. David had barely enough time to put on his environmental suit before they left the ship's protection. The wind outside was already howling, carrying clouds of radioactive dust that made his scanner scream warnings. Sarah led him back to the ancient altar where he had first found her. The pyramid structure seemed to glow in the stormlight, its dragon carvings alive with moving shadows. At the top, where she had been chained, Sarah began to speak in a language older than human civilization. The words seemed to have power of their own. As Sarah chanted, her skin began to glow brighter, scales becoming visible along her arms and face. The air around them grew warmer despite the storm winds, and David felt something responding in his own chest. "Now you must speak your heart," Sarah told him, raising her voice over the wind. "Tell the universe why you choose this bond, what you offer to the joining." David looked at her, really looked at her as lightning crashed overhead and radiation levels climbed toward lethal. Her scales caught the stormlight like jewels, and her golden eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. She was magnificent and terrible and completely alien, and he loved her more than he had ever loved anything. "I choose this bond because I found someone who values truth over comfort," David shouted over the storm. "Someone who chose growth over safety and knowledge over tradition. Someone who listened to voices from the stars and dared to dream of something better." The storm was almost on top of them now. David's suit alarms were going crazy as radiation poured down like invisible rain. But Sarah's glow was getting brighter, and he could feel warmth spreading through his body even though the logical part of his mind knew he should be dying. "I offer my determination," David continued, surprised by how natural the words felt. "My refusal to give up when things get hard. My curiosity about the universe and everyone in it. I promise to stand with you against whatever comes, to learn from you and teach you in return." Sarah took his hands in hers, and where their gloved fingers touched, light flared. "And I offer my fire," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the storm. "My strength that comes from the heart of stars. My knowledge of the old ways and my dreams of new ones. My promise to burn bright beside you until the last star dies." The moment their words ended, the full force of the death wind hit them. David felt the radiation trying to tear him apart at the cellular level. His suit's protection meant nothing against this kind of assault. But as the killing energy washed over them, Sarah's light exploded outward, surrounding them both in a sphere of golden fire. The radiation struck the barrier and simply stopped existing, not reflected or absorbed but transformed into something harmless that fed back into Sarah's flames. David felt her strength flowing into him through their joined hands, while his own stubborn human refusal to die anchored her power and gave it focus. They stood together at the center of the storm while death winds raged around them, protected by something that shouldn't have been possible according to any science David knew. Human will and dragon magic, joined by love and ceremony into something greater than either could achieve alone. The storm lasted for hours. When it finally passed, David and Sarah were still standing hand in hand on the altar, surrounded by a landscape scoured clean by radiation that should have killed everything for miles around. But they were alive, unhurt, and David could feel the bond between them like a warm presence in his chest. "Is it done?" he asked. "It is done," Sarah confirmed. "We are married by the old laws and the new ones, bonded until death and beyond." David looked around at the devastated landscape, then back at his new wife. Her scales were fully visible now, beautiful patterns of gold and copper that made her look like a living work of art. Her eyes held depths of ancient wisdom, but when she looked at him, they sparkled with very human happiness. "So what do we do now?" David asked. Sarah's smile was radiant. "Now we go home, husband, both of our homes, and we show the universe what two different kinds of people can build together." As they walked back to the ship hand in hand, David realized that his solo mission had become something completely different. He was no longer exploring the void alone. He had a partner now, someone to share the wonders and dangers of space, someone who understood that the best discoveries came from taking risks and asking questions others were afraid to ask. Behind them, the death moon continued its orbit around the dying gas giant, but for the first time in generations, it had hosted something beautiful instead of just tragedy. Love had bloomed in the wasteland, and two souls from different stars had chosen to face the future together. The universe, David thought, was about to become a much more interesting place. Red lights flashed across the docking bay as David's ship settled onto the landing platform at Mars Station. Through the viewport, he could see armed security teams taking positions around the dock, their weapons trained on his vessel. Behind them, a crowd of officials in expensive suits waited with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely controlled panic. "They seem nervous," Sarah observed, watching the scene with interest. Over the 2-week journey from the death moon, her appearance had stabilized into something that looked mostly human at first glance. But her golden eyes and the subtle scales along her neck and arms made it clear she was something else entirely. "They're scared," David corrected. First contact with a new alien species is supposed to be a carefully planned diplomatic event, not something a solo scout brings home as a wife. The communication system crackled to life. "Scout Vessel Morningstar, this is Mars Station Control. You are ordered to remain in your ship until a security team can board and verify your status." David keyed the microphone. "Mars Control, this is Commander David Ross returning from Mission 77 Alpha. I have a passenger aboard who requires immediate diplomatic immunity status." "Negative, Morningstar. All unknown aliens must be processed through quarantine and evaluation protocols. Prepare to be boarded." Sarah placed her hand on David's shoulder and he felt warmth flow through their bond. Are they always this suspicious of visitors? "Only when those visitors might change everything they think they know about the universe," David said. He keyed the microphone again. "Mars Control. My passenger is my wife under both human and alien law. Any attempt to separate us or treat her as a specimen will be met with resistance." The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. When the voice returned, it belonged to someone with much more authority. "Commander Ross, this is Admiral Patricia Hayes. You will dock at Bay 7 and submit to immediate debriefing. Your passenger will be treated with all appropriate respect during the evaluation process." David recognized the name. Admiral Hayes ran the Office of Alien Affairs, the department responsible for managing humanity's relationships with other species. If she was handling this personally, the situation was even more serious than he had thought. "At least she called you my passenger instead of a specimen," Sarah said mildly. "Give them time," David muttered. The security team that boarded their ship was professional but tense. The team leader, a woman with sergeant's stripes and suspicious eyes, swept the interior with scanners that went crazy the moment they pointed at Sarah. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the alien," the sergeant said to David. "Her name is Sarah, and she's my wife," David replied, not moving. She's also more intelligent than half the people in this station, so you might want to show some respect. The sergeant's scanner readings were climbing into dangerous territory. Sir, my instruments indicate the alien is generating some kind of energy field. For safety reasons. The energy field is harmless, Sarah interrupted, speaking perfect galactic standard. It is a natural function of my physiology, similar to how your hearts generate electrical fields. I can demonstrate if you wish. The sergeant stared at Sarah in shock. Most of the alien species humanity had encountered were either nonverbal or spoke through translators. Hearing fluent standard from someone who looked like a mythical dragon was clearly not what she had expected. That won't be necessary, David said quickly. But thank you for the offer, dear. The debriefing room was a sterile white box with recording equipment and chairs that had been designed to intimidate. Admiral Hayes waited inside with a small army of scientists, diplomats, and security personnel. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Commander Ross, she said without preamble, you've created quite a situation. First contact protocols exist for good reasons. The protocols assume we have time to plan and prepare, David replied. Sarah was dying when I found her. Should I have let her die for the sake of paperwork? Admiral Hayes turned her attention to Sarah, who sat calmly despite being the focus of intense scrutiny from dozens of specialists. And you are the alien in question? I am Sarah, daughter of the Flamewing clan and wife to David Ross, Sarah replied with dignity. I am pleased to meet representatives of his people, though I confess your greeting customs are somewhat hostile. One of the scientists leaned forward eagerly. Can you describe your species' evolutionary history? How long have you been spacefaring? What is your technological level? Dr. Martinez, Admiral Hayes said sharply, we'll conduct this interview properly. She looked back at Sarah. Can you tell us about your people? For the next several hours, Sarah patiently answered questions about dragon biology, culture, and history. She demonstrated her energy manipulation abilities by safely powering a diagnostic scanner, explained the ritual bonding that had saved their lives, and provided detailed information about the scattered dragon clans across the galaxy. The assembled experts grew more excited with each revelation. Sarah's people possessed knowledge of energy manipulation that could revolutionize human technology. Her understanding of galactic history filled in gaps that had puzzled xenoarchaeologists for decades. The marriage ritual alone opened new possibilities for human-alien cooperation, but the legal questions remained problematic. The issue, explained Chief Legal Advisor Williams, is that we have no framework for interspecies marriage. Human law recognizes unions between citizens, but citizenship requires being human. Then change the law, David said bluntly. We've had diplomatic marriages between different human cultures for thousands of years. This is just expanding the definition. It's not that simple, Williams protested. There are biological considerations, security implications, cultural complications, all of which can be addressed with time and good faith, Admiral Hayes interrupted. She had been listening carefully to everything Sarah said, and David could see her making calculations about political possibilities and diplomatic advantages. Ma'am, one of the security advisors spoke up. There's also the question of what other alien species might think about this precedent. Some of our allies have expressed concerns about rapid cultural integration. Sarah spoke for the first time in an hour. With respect, I believe your concerns are premature. The bond between David and myself is unique to our specific circumstances. It cannot be easily replicated, nor should it be attempted without deep mutual understanding between the parties involved. But it could be replicated? Admiral Hayes asked with interest. Perhaps given enough trust in compatible individuals, Sarah replied, but such bonds require genuine emotional connection and shared purpose. They cannot be forced or faked for political advantage. The scientists wanted to study Sarah's abilities in detail. The diplomats wanted to use her knowledge to open relations with other dragon clans. The security people wanted to understand the potential military applications of her energy manipulation. Everyone wanted something, and David could see Sarah growing tired of being treated like a fascinating puzzle instead of a person. Enough, he said finally. You've had your questions and gotten your answers. My wife needs rest, food, and basic consideration for her comfort. This interrogation ends now. Commander, Admiral Hayes said carefully, you understand that this situation affects more than just your personal happiness. The implications for human-alien relations are enormous. And you understand that treating Sarah like a specimen instead of a person will ensure those implications are negative, David shot back. She's not a resource to be exploited or a problem to be managed. She's my wife and a potential ally if you're smart enough to treat her with respect. Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying both David and Sarah with those sharp eyes. Finally, she nodded. You're right, of course. We've been so focused on the politics that we've forgotten basic courtesy. She turned to Sarah with a smile that seemed genuine. I apologize for the harsh welcome. Would you and your husband join me for a proper dinner? I'd like to hear about your experiences without the pressure of official proceedings. Over the next few days, Admiral Hayes proved to be surprisingly pragmatic. She fast-tracked citizenship paperwork for Sarah, officially recognized the marriage under an emergency provision for diplomatic unions, and assigned them quarters together instead of separating them for further study. Not everyone was happy with her decisions. David received angry communications from Earth politicians who thought the Admiral was moving too fast. Sarah faced hostility from some of the station's human population who saw her as a threat to human purity or security, but there were positive responses too. Young officers and scientists sought them out, fascinated by the possibilities their union represented. Messages of support arrived from across human space, from people who saw their marriage as a symbol of humanity's potential for growth and adaptation. The breakthrough came when a power failure struck the station's main reactor. Human engineers struggled for hours to diagnose the problem. While backup systems slowly failed, Sarah asked for permission to help, and within minutes she had identified the issue and guided the repair teams to a solution that would have taken them days to discover. Your wife just saved about 2,000 lives, Admiral Hayes told David that evening, and probably prevented a diplomatic incident that would have set back human-alien relations for decades. She's good at solving problems, David said proudly. Yes, she is, which is why I'm making a decision that's going to make a lot of people very unhappy. Admiral Hayes handed David a datapad with official seals. Effective immediately, you and Sarah are appointed as special ambassadors for interspecies relations. Your mission is to establish contact with other dragon clans and develop protocols for peaceful integration. David stared at the orders in amazement. You're sending us back out there? I'm sending you where you can do the most good, Admiral Hayes replied. Together you represent something new, proof that humans and aliens can build something better than mere trade agreements or military alliances. The universe needs to see what that looks like. That night, as they prepared for their new mission, Sarah stood by the viewport watching the stars. Your people are more adaptable than mine were, she said thoughtfully. They fear change, but they don't let fear paralyze them. Some of them do, David said, thinking of the protests and angry messages they had received. But enough of them are willing to try new things. That's what makes us human, I think. The ability to change when we have to. Sarah turned from the stars to smile at him. Then perhaps there is hope for both our peoples. Perhaps the old barriers can finally be broken. David pulled her close, feeling their bond warm and steady in his chest. With you as my partner? I'd say the barriers don't stand a chance. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of their home on New Geneva as David prepared breakfast for two. The frontier colony world had seemed like the perfect place to start their new life together, far enough from Earth's politics to avoid constant scrutiny, but civilized enough to offer good research facilities and communication networks. Sarah emerged from their workshop wearing safety goggles and clothes singed by recent experiments. Her scales caught the light as she moved, creating patterns that still amazed David after 6 months of marriage. She had been working all night again, trying to adapt dragon energy techniques for human manufacturing processes. Any breakthroughs? David asked, handing her a cup of coffee modified with nutrients her dragon physiology required. 3 explosions, 2 small fires, and 1 moment of perfect energy resonance that lasted exactly 4 seconds, Sarah reported cheerfully. I consider that progress, David laughed. Living with Sarah had taught him that failure was just another form of learning, and that the most interesting discoveries often came from experiments that went wrong in unexpected ways. Her dragon perspective on problem-solving had already revolutionized several human industries just through the technical papers they published. Together, their communicator chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Lisa Chen at the Colonial Engineering Institute. David, Sarah, you need to see this. The energy efficiency improvements from your latest paper just solved our power grid problems on 3 different worlds. The Colonial Council wants to fund a full research partnership. Another success story, David said, but Sarah looked troubled. The faster our work spreads, the more attention we attract, she said. Not all of it will be friendly. She was right to be concerned. Their marriage had made them famous across human space, but fame brought dangers along with opportunities. Religious extremists on Earth had declared their union an abomination against natural order. Hardline human supremacist groups saw Sarah as a threat to human genetic purity. Even some alien species had expressed concerns about the precedent their relationship set. The death threats had started arriving 3 months ago. David's work as a xenoarchaeology consultant had uncovered evidence of other dragon settlements throughout the sector. Each discovery brought them closer to finding Sarah's scattered people, but it also revealed the extent of the ancient catastrophe that had destroyed dragon civilization. Whatever had shattered their empire had been thorough and brutal. The sundering wasn't just a war or natural disaster, Sarah explained as they studied ruins on the 4th world they had explored together. Something systematically targeted our knowledge centers, our communication networks, our ability to maintain contact between clans. Whoever did this wanted us isolated and vulnerable. The implications were disturbing. Someone or something had deliberately crippled one of the galaxy's most advanced species. The fact that humans had never encountered evidence of this enemy suggested either they were long dead or very good at staying hidden. But there were positive discoveries too. They found a clan of dragon refugees who had maintained more of their technology than Sarah's people. The Firecrest clan welcomed Sarah as a sister, and David as the first human worthy of their trust. Through them, David and Sarah made contact with other scattered groups across the galaxy. Not all the reunions were happy. Some clans had devolved into savage tribalism, their knowledge lost to generations of struggle for survival. Others had adapted so completely to their new worlds that they barely resembled dragons anymore. But a few had maintained their culture and science, and these became eager partners in rebuilding what had been lost. The real breakthrough came when they discovered the archive. Hidden on a dead world in an unmarked system, the archive contained the preserved knowledge of the Dragon Empire at its height. Sarah wept when she saw it. Vast crystal matrices containing everything from scientific formulas to poetry, from star charts to children's songs. It was the cultural heritage of her entire species, waiting for someone to rediscover it. This changes everything, David said as they explored the endless halls of stored information. With this knowledge, your people could rebuild their civilization. Our people, Sarah corrected gently. You are as much a part of this as I am now. The archive also contained warnings about the enemies who had caused the sundering. The Devourers, the ancient records called them, a parasitic species that consumed other civilizations by turning them against themselves. They were masters of infiltration and psychological warfare, able to destroy entire empires without ever revealing their own presence. They're still out there, Sarah said grimly as they studied the warnings. The archive's sensors detect signs of their activity in distant galaxies. Sooner or later, they'll return to this one. David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the archive's climate control. Humanity was just beginning to explore beyond their home system. They were completely unprepared for enemies who could destroy civilizations as advanced as the Dragon Empire. Then we need to get ready for them, he said, all of us together. Their return to New Geneva brought both celebration and crisis. The discovery of the archive made headlines across human space and attracted attention from dozens of alien species. But it also triggered the most serious assassination attempt they had faced yet. The attack came during a public presentation at the Colonial University. David was explaining the historical significance of the archive when explosions rocked the auditorium. Armed figures in military gear stormed the building, their weapons targeting both David and Sarah with lethal precision. Human purity must be preserved. Their leader shouted over the chaos. The alien contamination ends here. But the attackers had underestimated their target. Sarah's dragon nature erupted in response to the threat, her human disguise burning away as scales covered her body and energy coursed around her like living lightning. She moved faster than human eyes could follow, disarming attackers and shielding civilians with barriers of pure force. David fought beside her with human weapons and tactics, but it was their bond that made them truly formidable. Through their connection, they could coordinate perfectly, each knowing what the other would do before they did it. Human determination combined with dragon power created something greater than either could achieve alone. The attack failed completely. Most of the terrorists were captured alive, and investigation revealed connections to extremist groups on a dozen worlds. But more importantly, the footage of David and Sarah fighting together became a symbol that spread across the galaxy. "Look at them," Admiral Hayes said during a secure communication from Mars Station. "Perfect coordination, absolute trust, fighting not just for themselves but for everyone around them. This is what cooperation between species should look like." The aftermath brought changes David hadn't expected. Instead of driving them apart, the terrorist attack had brought their communities together. Humans and aliens who had been suspicious of their relationship now saw them as heroes who had risked their lives to protect. Innocent marriage proposals started arriving from other interspecies couples who wanted to follow their example. Young people from both human and alien worlds sought them out for advice on building relationships across cultural barriers. Their home became an unofficial embassy where different species could meet on neutral ground. "We've become a movement without meaning to," Sarah observed as they read the latest batch of messages from couples seeking guidance. "Is that a bad thing?" David asked. "Not bad," Sarah said thoughtfully. "But it means we have responsibilities beyond just our own happiness. People are looking to us for answers about how to build a better future." They established the Ross-Sarah Foundation, a research and cultural center dedicated to promoting peaceful cooperation between species. The organization attracted scientists, diplomats, and educators from across the galaxy, all working toward the same goal of building bridges between different forms of life. The work was challenging but rewarding. They developed new protocols for first contact situations, created translation systems for previously incompatible languages, and established exchange programs that allowed young people from different species to learn about each other's cultures. But the most important development was personal. "I'm pregnant," Sarah announced one evening as they watched the sunset from their garden. Her hand rested on her stomach, which showed no sign of change yet, but David could feel the truth of it through their bond. Is that possible?" David stammered. "I mean, we're different species. The bonding ritual changes things at a cellular level," Sarah explained. "It makes what should be impossible into something beautiful. Our child will be unique, human and dragon, a bridge between our peoples made flesh." David pulled her close, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. Their child would grow up in a universe full of dangers, with enemies who destroyed entire civilizations and extremists who killed for the crime of being different. But they would also inherit the best of both species, human adaptability and dragon wisdom, the ability to find hope in the darkest places and the strength to defend what they loved. "What kind of world are we bringing them into?" David wondered. "A world that needs them," Sarah replied confidently. "A world that's finally ready to grow beyond old prejudices and ancient fears. A world where love can triumph over hate, if we're brave enough to fight for it." As they sat together watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, David realized that their story was just beginning. They had found each other across the void, built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy, and proven that different kinds of people could create a future worth living. Now they had to help raise a child who would inherit that future and make it even better. The universe, David thought as he felt new life growing through their bond, was about to become more interesting than anyone could imagine. Snow fell gently outside the windows of the Ross-Sarah Institute as David adjusted his reading glasses and turned another page in the memoir he was writing. At 68, his hair had gone completely gray, but his eyes still held the curiosity that had driven him to explore the void all those years ago. Across the room, Sarah worked at her energy loom, weaving patterns of light into crystalline matrices that would become teaching tools for the next generation of interspecies researchers. "Grandfather, tell us about the death moon again," said a young voice from the doorway. David looked up to see Kira, his 8-year-old granddaughter, standing with her twin brother Alex. Both children showed the beautiful blending of human and dragon heritage, human features softened by scales that shifted color with their emotions, eyes that held depths of ancient wisdom, and an energy that seemed to light up any room they entered. "You've heard that story 100 times," David said with a smile. "But you tell it differently each time," Alex pointed out. "Last week you said grandmother was glowing like a star. Yesterday you said she was glowing like a sunset. That's because your grandmother contains multitudes," David said, winking at Sarah. "She's been both a star and a sunset, depending on my need in the day," Sarah laughed, the sound still as musical as it had been 30 years ago. Her appearance had changed little over the decades. Dragon longevity meant she would outlive David by centuries, a fact that both treasured and grieved them. But their bond would endure beyond physical death, a connection that transcended the boundaries of flesh and time. "Tell them about the wedding," Sarah suggested. "That's the part they really want to hear." The children settled on the carpet as David recounted the story of their marriage ritual in the radiation storm. It had become family legend, but also something more. A founding myth for the growing community of interspecies families that now called the Institute home. Through the windows, David could see the sprawling campus that had grown from their small research foundation. Students from dozens of species walked the paths between buildings, their diverse forms a testament to how much the galaxy had changed. Human children played with young dragons, while alien researchers collaborated with human scientists on projects that would have been unimaginable when David was young. The Ross-Sarah Institute had become the premier center for interspecies studies in human space, but its influence reached far beyond academic circles. The protocols developed here had prevented 3 interstellar wars and facilitated peaceful first contact with 17 new species. The translation systems created in their laboratories allowed communication between forms of life that had never been able to speak to each other before. But the Institute's greatest achievement was its graduates, young people from different worlds who had learned to see beyond the barriers of species and culture. They went on to become diplomats, explorers, scientists, and leaders who carried the message of cooperation to every corner of the galaxy. "The communication array is picking up something interesting," said Dr. Elena Martinez, David's former colleague who now served as the Institute's director of communications. She burst into the study with excitement that reminded David of their younger days. "We're getting signals from the far spiral arm. It looks like dragon clans we've never contacted before." Sarah looked up from her energy loom with interest. "What kind of signals?" "Academic transmissions, mostly. Mathematical proofs, scientific theories, cultural exchanges. It looks like they've been watching our work here and want to join the network." The communication network between scattered dragon clans had been one of the Institute's early successes. Using principles recovered from the archive, they had established faster-than-light communication links that allowed the dispersed survivors of dragon civilization to reconnect with each other. What had begun as a dozen isolated clans had grown into a loose confederation of hundreds of settlements across the galaxy. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" David asked. The threat of the Devourers was never far from his mind, even after decades of peaceful progress. "Still no direct contact," Elena replied, "but the early warning systems are working perfectly. If they return to this galaxy, we'll know long before they arrive." The defense networks were another product of human-dragon cooperation. Using archive knowledge combined with human manufacturing techniques, they had established monitoring stations throughout known space. The network could detect the energy signatures that characterized Devourer technology, giving the galaxy's civilizations time to prepare for renewed attack. But David hoped such preparations would never be necessary. The galaxy was stronger now than it had been during the original sundering. Dozens of species worked together, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that would have been impossible during the Dragon Empire's isolated glory days. "Grandfather," Kira said thoughtfully, "do you think the Devourers might not be evil? Maybe they just don't understand how to cooperate with other people." "That's a very wise question," David said. "Your grandmother and I have wondered the same thing. Maybe the real victory isn't destroying them, but finding a way to teach them what we've learned about working together. Some problems can only be solved with love," Alex added, repeating one of Sarah's favorite sayings. "And some can only be solved with determination," Kira countered, quoting David's response. "Both of you are right," Sarah said gently. "That's why your grandparents work so well together. Love and determination, wisdom and curiosity. Dragon and human, all stronger when they're combined. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, David and Sarah walked through the Institute's gardens. Bioluminescent plants from a dozen worlds created patterns of soft light along the paths, while overhead the binary stars of the New Geneva system painted the sky in shades of gold and silver. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked as they paused beside the memorial garden, dedicated to those lost in the sundering. "Leaving your people's ways behind, choosing a future with humans instead of trying to rebuild the past?" "Never," Sarah said without hesitation. The past was beautiful, but it was also limited. Dragon civilization was magnificent, but it was just dragons. What we've built here includes everyone, not just my people and yours, but dozens of species working together toward something greater than any of us could achieve alone. They stopped before the newest addition to the memorial, a crystal matrix, containing the preserved consciousness of Elder Piran, the last dragon who remembered the Empire at its height. Before his death, he had transferred his memories into the archive format, ensuring that future generations would understand both the glory and the mistakes of their ancestors. "He told me something before he died," Sarah said quietly. "He said that the sundering might have been necessary, not the violence and suffering, but the scattering that followed. The Dragon Empire had become stagnant, too proud to change or grow. Maybe we needed to be broken apart so we could learn to build something better. From the ashes, something new," David said, remembering words from an old Earth poem. "From the ashes, something better," Sarah corrected. "Something that includes love as well as power, cooperation as well as competition." They walked on through the gardens, past laboratories where late-night researchers worked on projects that would reshape the galaxy, past dormitories where students from different worlds shared stories and dreams, past the communications center where messages traveled between stars at the speed of thought. At the center of the garden stood the monument that had become the Institute's symbol. Two figures, one human and one dragon, reaching toward each other across a stylized void. The inscription beneath was written in 17 languages, but the meaning was universal. Love bridges all distances. "Our daughter sent a message today," Sarah said as they admired the monument. "She's established first contact with a new species in the Magellanic Clouds, crystalline beings who communicate through harmonic resonance. She thinks they might have knowledge that could help us defend against the Devourers." David smiled proudly. Luna Ross Sarah had inherited the best qualities of both her parents: human curiosity and dragon wisdom, the courage to explore unknown spaces and the patience to build lasting relationships. As the galaxy's first successful human-dragon hybrid, she had become a legend in her own right, opening new worlds and making allies wherever she traveled. "And the grandchildren?" David asked, following in her footsteps naturally. "Kira wants to be a diplomat like her mother, while Alex is more interested in the technical side. He's been designing new communication arrays that could reach other galaxies entirely." The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities that would have been unimaginable when David first answered that distress signal from the Death Moon. Their children and grandchildren would face new challenges, encounter new species, and build relationships that would reshape the very nature of galactic civilization. But they would face those challenges together, united by bonds that transcended species and culture. They would carry forward the lesson that David and Sarah had learned in a radiation storm on a dying world, that love and determination, combined with courage and hope, could overcome any obstacle. As they headed back toward their home, Sarah suddenly stopped and looked up at the stars with an expression of wonder. "What is it?" David asked. "Do you feel that?" she said softly. "Through the network, through all the bonds we've helped create, I can sense them. Hundreds of families like ours scattered across the galaxy. Humans and dragons, yes, but also others. Species we helped bring together. Relationships that grew from the example we set." David reached out with his own senses, following their bond into the vast network of connections that linked the Institute to communities across known space. He felt it too, a warm presence, like voices raised in harmony, like lights joining together to push back the darkness. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's hope," Sarah replied. "Whatever comes, devourers or some other threat we can't imagine, we won't face it alone. We've built something that can survive anything because it's based on love instead of fear. Cooperation instead of conquest. They stood together under the alien stars, feeling the pulse of life and connection that linked worlds across the galaxy. Somewhere out there, their daughter was making new allies among the crystal singers. Their grandchildren slept peacefully, dreaming of adventures that would carry their family's mission to new heights. And in the deepest reaches of space, monitoring stations watched for signs of ancient enemies, while communications arrays carried messages of hope and friendship between species that had once been strangers. The Death Moon still orbited its dying star, but it was no longer a place of despair. Dragon pilgrims came there now to see the altar where love had triumphed over tradition, where two souls from different worlds had chosen to face the universe together. And sometimes, when the radiation storms danced across that barren landscape, visitors claimed they could still feel the echo of the binding ritual that had changed everything, a whisper of warmth and light that promised better days ahead for all who dared to reach across the void and find friendship among the stars. "Come on," David said finally, taking Sarah's hand. "Let's go home." "We are home," Sarah replied, gesturing to encompass the institute, the gardens, the galaxy itself. "Wherever we are together, wherever love builds bridges between different kinds of people, that's home." They walked together toward their house, past windows glowing with warm light, past laboratories where tomorrow's miracles were being born, past dormitories where the future leaders of galactic civilization were learning to see beyond the boundaries of species and culture. Behind them, the stars shone down on a universe that was no longer divided by fear and prejudice, but united by the simple truth they had discovered on a dying moon 30 years ago. That sometimes what others call abandonment, the universe calls opportunity, and sometimes what seems like an ending is really the first page of a story no one dared to write.